Hi, I'm Roman Lysecky, CTO and co-founder for BG Networks. I'm really excited to be able to present a series of videos where we can dive into cybersecurity topics as they relate to medical devices, automotive systems, industrial systems, looking at both the technologies that might be relevant to your designs today, as well as some of the future technologies that will be coming and how new products being developed can be shaped by those new technologies. I'd like to kick that off by talking about cyber resilience and what does cyber resilience mean, particularly in the terms of real-time threat detection and recovery methods that you can deploy within IoT systems. So the context for this is that within many systems right now, you have some capability to detect if there are intrusions or attacks within an IoT device. You may have been deploying an intrusion detection system that's monitoring network traffic, or a host-based system that's monitoring the system itself. And part of those technologies is they'll be able to detect if there's an active intrusion, an active attack that's targeting that system. And now you have this new capability. If you could detect those attacks in real time, you can actually have cyber resilience built into your device that would enable you to define some method of recovering or self-healing from the attack. What's really key about this whole thing, especially when you're talking life-critical systems like automotive device vehicles or medical devices, is you have these life-critical characteristics, meaning that you have drivers and passengers in your vehicles. You have a patient whose health depends upon the continued operation of that device. So when I talk about cyber resilience in that case, it's really the goal of how do I try to preserve the foundational operational capability of that device, the critical parts of that, keep it operational, in spite of there being an intrusion or attack that's actually affecting the system. So that's what I mean by the concept of cyber resilience. The approaches you can deploy for cyber resilience, now that you know an attack or intrusion is happening, they can vary, and they're going to have to be defined for your particular device. There's no one-size-fits-all approach that works. For example, if you take the simplest approach out there, which is, well, if I have an attack affecting my system, I could recover from that. I could put it back into a safe state by rebooting my device. Upon reboot, I can go through the existing secure boot process, verify my software hasn't been tampered with, it's authentic, boot up my system, bring that all up. That can work for some devices, but for many, such as a brake controller on an automobile, or an implanted pacemaker or defibrillator, you can't simply reboot the system. That period of time where you're rebooting the system means your device is not operational. And so you're losing that critical functionality that's so inherent to the safety of driver, passenger, or patient. So if that's not appropriate, what are the other techniques you could deploy in those types of systems? And this would then depend upon your requirements around the system and what you're trying to protect with the cyber resilience. So for example, with a pacemaker, many of these devices have the ability to communicate with external devices for programming or communicating with an application or a home monitoring device for that level of communication. That is a very useful feature to have. It does help the patient safety, but in terms of the core operation of the device, to keep a patient's heart in a healthy state and preserve the functioning of the heart, you don't need those external interfaces. So one approach to cyber resilience, if you can detect an attack against one of those external interfaces, is you could disable that particular interface. So you're preserving a core functionality, but you're disabling something that's not necessarily a core functionality. How you do that for a device depends upon how you define those core functionalities. So to some extent, you could have different levels of that functionality. And so depending upon what's being affected by the attack, you can disable different components within the system to give you that level of cyber resilience. In other cases, you can look at some of the forward-looking capabilities for cyber resilience, and it's the notion of self-healing. So self-healing is much more advanced, where you've actually built in different ways of performing the same operation, such that if a vulnerability existed in your software, such as an unknown software bug that an attacker could exploit to compromise the device and gain access to it, you could have an alternative way of executing that same recovery. It's a little bit like fault tolerance, but you've built it into the system such that you're only triggering the fault tolerance if you've detected an intrusion or attack that's targeting a specific software component. So you could switch from executing one SSL library if you can detect there's a compromise that's behaving abnormally. You could switch over and utilize an alternative SSL implementation that would allow you to keep the same level of operation just using a different software implementation. That, of course, requires you to design this resilience into the system at the very beginning. But what is, I think, really novel about this all is that this level of resilience of being able to self-heal or have scaling back these approaches is really driven by a core capability you're seeing deployed more into endpoints within IoT, which is an intrusion detection system, giving you that real-time alert. So now that it's available, you kind of open the door to building in these other capabilities into your devices. And any cyber resilience capability, particularly when it relates to safety, has to be designed into the system at the very beginning, because the resilience itself is part of your system design. You may need security controls to support the elements that are implementing the cyber resilience. And then all of that has to be tied into your quality management, your secure product development framework to make sure you've implemented it correctly and to make sure you're verifying, validating, and testing all of those features in your design. But in the end, you have a much more robust solution that's really capable of keeping your end users operationally safe in spite of there being an attack. And that also then gives you the ability of more time to be able to fix that vulnerability and to restore the full functionality of the device. But you know you've preserved the operation while you're in parallel providing a firmware update to patch a software bug that might have been in the system. So I think there's so much we'll be able to do as we start to look at devices that have cyber resilience and self-healing. I think we're at the beginning point of that. There's several user groups out there or working groups that are looking to define standards around this. One that would be interesting if you wanted to take a look at, the Trusted Computing Group has a cyber resilience working group. They're doing some very interesting things in defining standards and different requirements for that. Please check them out. And I'd love to see you next time. Thanks. Bye.